The Laotian Civil War was fought between the Communist Pathet Lao and the Royal Lao government, with both sides receiving heavy external support in a proxy war between the global Cold War superpowers. Among the CIA Special Activities Division and Hmong veterans of the conflict, it is called the Secret War. The Kingdom of Laos was a covert theater for other belligerents during the Vietnam War. The Franco-Lao Treaty of Amity and Association, signed the 22nd of October 1953, transferred remaining French powers, except control of military affairs, to the Royal Lao government, establishing Laos as an independent member of the French Union. However, this government did not include representatives from the Laos-era anti-colonial armed nationalist movement. The following years were marked by a rivalry between the neutralists under Prince Suvarnabhumi, the right-wing under Prince Bao Noum of Champasak, and the left-wing Lao Patriotic Front under Prince Suphanuvong and half-Vietnamese future Prime Minister Kazone Pham. Several attempts were made to establish coalition governments, and a tri-coalition government was finally seated in Vientiane. The actual fighting in Laos involved the North Vietnamese Army, US, Thai, and South Vietnamese forces directly and through irregular proxies in a struggle for control over the Laotian Panhandle. The North Vietnamese Army occupied the area to use for its Ho Chi Minh Trail supply corridor and as staging area for offensives into South Vietnam. There was a second major theater of action on and near the northern plain of Jars. The North Vietnamese and Pathet Lao eventually emerged victorious in 1975, as part of the general communist victory in all of former French Indochina that year. Overview. The Geneva Conference established Laotian neutrality. The People's Army of Vietnam, however, continued to operate in both northern and southeastern Laos. There were repeated attempts from 1954 onward to force the North Vietnamese out of Laos, but regardless of any agreements or concessions, Hanoi had no intention of withdrawing from the country or abandoning its Laotian communist allies. North Vietnam established the Ho Chi Minh Trail as a paved highway in the southeast of Laos and paralleling the Vietnamese border. The trail was designed to allow North Vietnamese troops and supplies to infiltrate the Republic of Vietnam, as well as to aid the National Liberation Front. North Vietnam also had a sizable military effort in northern Laos, while sponsoring and maintaining an indigenous communist rebellion, the Pathet Lao, to put pressure on the Royal Lao government. The U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, in an attempt to disrupt these operations in northern Laos without direct military involvement, responded by training a guerrilla force of about 30,000 Laotian hill tribesmen, mostly local Hmong tribesmen, along with the MENA KHMU, led by Royal Lao Army General Vang Pao, a Hmong military leader. This army, supported by the CIA proprietary airline Air America, Thailand, the Royal Lao Air Force, and a covert air operation directed by the United States Ambassador to Laos, fought the People's Army of Vietnam, the National Liberation Front, and the Pathet Lao allies to a seesaw stalemate, greatly aiding U.S. interests in the war in Vietnam. The status of the war in the north throughout the year generally depended on the weather. As the dry season started, in November or December, so did North Vietnamese military operations, as fresh troops and supplies flowed down out of North Vietnam on newly passable routes, either down from Dien Bien Phu, across Phong Sali province on all-weather highways, or on Route 7 through Ban Ban, Laos on the northeast corner of the plain of Jars. The CIA's covert operations clandestine army would give way, harrying the PAVN and Pathet Lao as they retreated. Raven FACs would direct massive airstrikes against the communists by USAF jets and RLAF T-28s to prevent the capture of the Laotian capitals of Vientiane and Luang Prabang. When the rainy season 6 months later rendered North Vietnamese supply lines inoperable, the Vietnamese communists would recede toward Vietnam. The war in the southeastern panhandle against the Ho Chi Minh Trail was primarily a massive air interdiction program by the USAF and United States Navy because political constraints kept the trail safe from ground assault from South Vietnam. Raven FACs also directed airstrikes here in the southeast. Other forward air controllers from South Vietnam, such as Covey FACs from the 20th Tactical Air Support Squadron and Nail FACs from the 23rd Tactical Air Support Squadron, also directed strikes. Other airstrikes were planned ahead. Overall coordination of the air campaign was directed by an airborne command and control center, such as those deployed in Operation Igloo White. The existence of the conflict in Laos was sometimes reported in the U.S., and described in press reports as the CIA's secret war in Laos because details were largely unavailable due to official government denials that the war existed. The denials were seen as necessary considering that the North Vietnamese government and the U.S. had both signed agreements specifying the neutrality of Laos. U.S. involvement was considered necessary because the drive had effectively conquered a large part of the country and was equally obfuscating its role in Laos. Despite these denials, however, the Civil War was actually the largest U.S. covert operation prior to the Soviet-Afghan War, with areas of Laos controlled by North Vietnam subjected to years of intense U.S. aerial bombardment, representing the heaviest bombing campaign in history. Overshadowing it all was the struggle of the Cold War, with the United States' policy of the containment of communism and the policies of the People's Republic of China and the Soviet Union of spreading communism via subversion and insurgency.